One. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Political Talk to JB. I am your host, Julian Boykin, and tonight I am joined by Mrs. Caroleene Dobson, who is running for Secretary of State, representing the great state of Alabama. Caroleene, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Julian?
I am doing great. Thanks for taking time out of your busy campaign schedule and sitting down and chatting with me for a few minutes. Tell everybody a little bit about your background and why you're running for Secretary of State.
Yes, well, I was born in Monroe County. I grew up there. Well, actually, I was born in a hospital in Montgomery, but raised in Monroe County, a small community called Beatrice. It's not a one stoplight town; it is a no stoplight town. So very rural area, North Monroe County. My dad was a cattle farmer and an orthodontist who served about four different counties in the area. My mother was a physical therapist who worked in Wilcox County next door for about 30 years. So I grew up with parents not in public service but in service in healthcare service. I graduated from high school in 2005. I went to Harvard College for undergrad, but I was a very proud member of the Harvard Republican Club when I was there. There were about 12 of us. But it actually really only made my conservative beliefs stronger because even then, Harvard was limiting the speech of conservative students and conservative faculty. And so it made me, for the first time ever, really have to stand up for both my political beliefs and my belief in God. And it was a difficult experience, sometimes very isolating, but one that was very formative to me and one that in retrospect I'm grateful for. I wanted to go to law school, and so after 4 years in they call it the People's Republic of Cambridge, Massachusetts, because it is almost communist. That's a nickname for it. I decided to try to find the most conservative law school I could find, and fortunately, got a scholarship at Baylor Law School, a Baptist law school in Texas. So I went to law school there, practiced in Texas for a few years. That's where I met my husband. And after we got married, when we were expecting our first child, I just knew I wanted to be back in Alabama, that's where I wanted to raise my family. So we've been back in Alabama for about 6 years now. I'm a shareholder at the law firm of Maynard Nexon. I'm a transactional attorney. I'm not in the courtroom, but I help small businesses in real estate matters and in corporate formation matters. I also serve on the Alabama Forestry Commission. And last year, I was the Republican nominee in the second congressional district, which was a highly competitive race pursuant to the redrawing of the districts in South Alabama. While I was disappointed in the outcome of that race, I know that God's will is perfect, and the experience of running for office truly was a blessing for me and my family. We're grateful for all the people we met, everything that we learned, and it only deepened my love for Alabama and my desire to want to try to find a way to serve it. And so now I'm running for the office of Secretary of State, in part because my experience of last year, again in a very contested general election, only drove home to me the importance of election integrity and the need that we have for trust in our election system, as well as my professional career, again, kind of been entirely dealing with corporate filings and the business services aspect of the Office of Secretary of State. I think my legal background will provide a good basis for making some common sense changes and streamlining a lot of those services to make it easier for small businesses to operate. Again, it comes down to trust. People need to have trust in their election systems, in our economy, and that our government is working to make life easier for the people of this state.
Well said. As it relates to election integrity, voter fraud, you know, every state has that issue. As it relates to Alabama, what is your plan to ensure election integrity and making sure that when voters go to vote, that they can be well assured that hey, their vote will count and no voter fraud will take place.
Right. No, and I mean, I think just because we haven't experienced the widespread presidential level election fraud that we saw. I mean, there's no question that the 2020 election was stolen from President Trump. Alabama wasn't complicit in that, but just because we weren't doesn't mean that we don't have fraud in this state. It's kind of like an analogy is like, okay, you've got a big department store, and maybe there's not embezzling in the, in the upper echelons of the store operation, but there's still shoplifting if you're not enforcing it. And so, thanks to our legislature, we now have passed in 2024 legislation that prohibits absentee ballot harvesting. And this was a very common type of election fraud throughout the United States, but certainly in Alabama. In my race, for instance, about 2 weeks before the election, a woman in Mobile was apprehended trying to forge the absentee ballot. She was a nursing home worker trying to forge the absentee ballot of a resident of a nursing home who had been deemed incompetent and therefore was not eligible to vote. This is just one instance, but in another county, um, on election day when the probate judge was accepting the absentee ballots, there were 43 absentee ballots that were either fraudulent and incomplete, and so they were discounted. So, again, we're not seeing fraud on a massive statewide scale, but at the same time, and I know that there's really no such thing as a small election. I know you're covering a lot of municipal races, but the reality is a city council race, a school board race, county commission race, these folks have just as much control over the development of opportunities in a county, in a community, the future of our kids, what they're learning in school. These offices impact our daily lives as much as a member of the U.S. House does, and so it's so important that we have election integrity and that we eradicate that fraud. To do that, I want to form an election integrity team within the Office of Secretary of State. Florida has a similar concept that I'd like to replicate. In Florida, it's called the Election Crimes Unit. But restructuring to create a team of dedicated experts, election law, IT experts that can really work to investigate these allegations of fraud and make it easier for our law enforcement to prosecute, to arrest, and then easier for our attorney general, district attorneys, U.S. attorneys, kind of depending on the jurisdiction of the case in the election, to prosecute these claims. We have some of the finest law enforcement in the nation. I was privileged to get to know a lot of them, have so much respect for what they do, but you can imagine when you're dealing with human trafficking and drugs and theft and traffic stops and someone reports election fraud, well, that's not part of your kind of daily wheelhouse. It's outside the bandwidth. A lot of our law enforcement is already very strained when it comes to resources and manpower. And so being able to kind of feed a claim of election fraud to this election integrity team to kind of allow them to investigate and follow up and then flip it back to law enforcement and to our prosecutors will allow us to actually eradicate election fraud. If people see that those who try to game the system are being caught and being prosecuted, then those folks will probably think twice about trying to do the same thing in their county, in their school board race. And so again, as a product of rural Alabama, I am committed to fighting for election integrity in every corner of the state, not just the highly populated urban areas, but truly in every corner of the state. Some of our most precious resources and true areas of opportunity are in our rural parts of the state, and a lot of times that's been the site of fraud because they're kind of outside the purview of where everyone's looking on election night.
Well said. As a small business owner, I am highly upset when it comes that time of the year, and I have to renew my business license and registered agent, things of that nature.
Mhm.
What is your plan on mitigating some of these fees that small business owners are faced with in Alabama? Because the fees are getting out, they're starting to get a little bit ridiculous, and it's like, okay, how do we reel it back in to where the small business owner doesn't have to sacrifice between keeping the business afloat versus being able to pay these fees that they're required to pay every year?
Right. No, and again, I'm running so that the small business owners like you in this state can have trust that our government is working to serve them because that's what our government is intended to do. You look at our Constitution, it's we the people form the government. You know, the authority comes from the voters of Alabama. And so we need a Secretary of State that is working at all times to try to make it easier for our small businesses to function. You know, large corporations, they've got a team of lawyers and compliance folks. This isn't, you know, they've got, you know, they can pay these fees and it's really, you know, when it's overly cumbersome, when it's overly expensive, like you're talking about, that's hurting our small businesses, which are truly the backbone of this state. And so I want to, first of all, reduce fees. There are some fees that I can reduce with it as Secretary of State. Other fees I'll need to work with the legislature to reduce. But yes, you're absolutely right. When you're trying to swap out a registered agent, the fee does not seem to be related to the cost of actually getting that done because so much everything is digitized these days. I also want to make the website a lot easier to navigate, while again ensuring that we're protecting the privacy of our small business owners' information. But we can make that website a lot more navigable. And in my legal practice, in advising a lot of small businesses, sometimes, you know, I would be hired by a client, you know, paying my legal fees basically to navigate the website for them. And while I have, you know, no disrespect to the legal profession, that's not a type of fee that lawyers should be charging for. People don't need to feel like they have to hire a lawyer just to file a change of registered agent report or to dissolve a business, for instance. So, trying to make that a lot more streamlined and also, again, communicating with the public and small communities, rural areas, and letting them know, you know, what you need to do to navigate the website. I think just providing an avenue for people to access the office and ask questions is also very, very important.
So let me ask you this question. This is a curveball. Crypto is big as we see more and more banks are starting to accept crypto. I am a crypto investor. I'm heavily involved in crypto. Would the state of Alabama be interested in accepting crypto as a payment to offset, when we're talking about digital currency? So as a small
Mhm.
business owner, if I don't have the cash on hand to pay my yearly fees associated with making sure that my company is in good standing, I have a registered agent and whatever else fees are associated with that. Would the state be open to accepting crypto, which allows the state to generate another stream of revenue just from a digital format? So
That is a great point and one I've not heard discussed with respect to this office. I mean, I too am a crypto investor, and I think what surprises a lot of people is that 1 in 5 Alabamians is, and I think, you know, I think a lot of people think crypto and they think about Silicon Valley or urban areas, but the reality is, you know, and you know too, in a lot of rural areas, we've seen banks close, we're seeing credit unions close. And for folks in rural areas, crypto provides another way of holding assets and holding currency. And so I think that's a great point. You know, last year in my congressional campaign, we accepted donations via crypto because we recognized and saw, you know, that many Alabamians, more than people realize, are crypto owners and want to utilize that form of currency. So thanks. That's a new avenue for, again, making the Office of Secretary of State and the services more accessible, meeting people where they are. So thank you. I'm grateful for this discussion for many reasons, but certainly for that one.
definitely let me know how I can help. When we talk about our elections and wanting voters to know that, hey, you can trust the system. How do we
Mhm.
ensure trust back into our elections where people know that they can trust the system itself?
Well, we've got to protect the process from start to finish. And there are things that we need to do on the registration front. You know, right now, Alabama does have a voter ID law. When you go to the polls to vote, you need to show your voter ID. But we need when you're registering to vote, I will advocate for legislative changes that require proof of citizenship and proof of identity and residency that you are who you say you are and you live where you say you live. Then when it comes to, again, the kind of voter registration period, we need to go toe to toe with these liberal out-of-state activist groups that are coming here trying to manipulate our voter registration rules to illegally register voters. And if you don't think that that happens, it did last year. George Soros funded groups were in Covington County, Alabama, and Mobile County, Alabama. And so we need to be prepared to challenge these groups, in the courts when they come here and again try to manipulate our registration rules. It also means, again, we need to enforce the anti-absentee ballot harvesting legislation that was passed in the 2024 session. It means on election day, we need to have adequate precincts and adequate poll workers. One of my passions also is trying to incentivize the next generation of poll workers. I don't know how it is at the precinct where you vote, but where I vote, there's some wonderful people, but they are all retirees, and they have a wealth of knowledge. But we
Yes.
have a lot of young people with flexible schedules that have, that work remotely, and we need the next generation to step up while the older generation is there to teach them and instruct them. We need consistent poll worker training throughout the state. I was recently visiting with the probate judge in Tuscaloosa County. And you, don't get me wrong, Tuscaloosa County is a populated county, but it's not Birmingham or Madison or
Right.
one of those counties. But just Tuscaloosa County alone, back in November for the November election, required 500 poll workers. So, and meanwhile, the Office of Secretary of State, the office itself only employs 38 full-time employees. So I think a lot of people think that there's this army of election integrity officials that magically shows up on election day. But the reality is it's private citizens like you and me. And I really want to work to incentivize and encourage more people, encourage law firms. They're always looking for pro bono opportunities. Well, encourage your attorneys to take a day off and do the training and be a poll worker. It is so important that we have people not only engaged in voting, but engaged in participating in securing our elections. And then when it comes to after the election, I will advocate for common sense, cost effective, and efficient post-election audit legislation. Alabama is one of only a few states that does not have any type of post-election audit process. And so I will work with our election officials, with our registrars, with our probate judges, and with our state legislature to come up with legislation again that can provide trust in the system and encourage the knowledge that our elections are secure, but at the same time be easy to effectuate and not waste taxpayer money and ensure that we're being good stewards of county resources in auditing elections and again identifying any problems that there might be that we might not realize. I think an audit can definitely reveal that, but it's important that we work together to find legislation that will accomplish restoring trust in our elections, and that means after election day too.
I believe we need more young people involved. I tell
Mhm.
people all the time, politics is not sexy. It's not a reality TV show. No, nobody cheated on nobody. You're not going to see a physical fight like you do in reality TV shows. So I believe it's a tug from both sides. But I believe if you talk to young people, they will say, hey, the old guard doesn't want to pass the gavel to allow us to lead. So you got to meet young people where they're at and realize, yes, they should know their history when it comes to politics. They should know about door knocking. They should know about candidate forum debates and things of that nature. They should do poll watching. But at the same time, it's not sexy, so it's boring. So you gotta it's a hard rub. You got to let them know, hey, look, this isn't sexy, but if you want to live in this country and if you want to be involved and if you express yourself verbally, you have to be willing to vote. If you vote,
Yeah.
you can complain, but if you complain and don't vote, it's kind of hard for people to take you
Right.
serious. When I
Yeah.
look at how businesses, when we're talking about businesses going to pay for registrations and things of that nature, would you, as Secretary of State, would you be open to creating an app so I don't have to literally log online? I can just go to the Alabama state website that
Mhm.
that Secretary of State has created and say, hey, there's a mobile app for Android and Apple users. Hey, you don't have to go to the website. You can go directly to this mobile
Mhm.
app, put in your tax ID number, pay your registration fees. There's also an option, cash, credit card, crypto, things of that nature. Because I believe in forward thinking. I
Right,
believe
right.
I believe in some forward progression where we can
Mhm.
employ a little ingenuity and say, okay, yes, we did it this way, but here's an alternative solution that it can we can meet people where they are. You got a lot of small
Right,
business
right.
that are always on the go. So how do you accommodate them so they can still be in business, and be on the go, and be able to make sure that their company is in good standing?
Right, right. No, and I've discussed the idea of an app on the campaign trail. I'm very much open to that. I think it would be a lot more user friendly, a lot more accessible. The issue would be, ensuring that we're developing an app that can be totally secure because you are sharing, your tax ID numbers, confidential information about you personally, about your company. But definitely I want to explore that and again, finding the balance between accessibility, but also ensuring that we've got a very secure system that again, it all comes down to trust so that people trust that I'm trying to make it easier for their business to operate, but they also trust that I'm protecting their information.
Great, great. If people want to ask additional questions, if they want to volunteer, donate to your campaign, how can they get in contact with you?
Yes, we're on social media, Dobson for Alabama. Our website is www.dobsonforalabama.com. I'll also share my personal email address on the campaign trail is Caroleene, that's Caroleene at dobsonforalabama.com. But on our social media, we have kind of upcoming events. It kind of tracks where I've been, but would love to hear from you because again, I've heard so many stories about either election fraud or about the challenges that small businesses are facing. And I can only do my job best when I hear from you, the voters, you, the small business owners. So this really is a team effort. I want, again, to hear your input, and I am so grateful for the opportunity to hopefully get to meet as many of you as possible over the next 9 months. But in case I don't, I'm going to ask you tonight humbly for your vote on May 19th, and of course for your prayers.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Caroline Dobson, campaigning for Secretary of State, representing the great state of Alabama. Mrs. Dobson, thank you for your time and best of luck to you in your campaign.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It was a pleasure to be with you.